Comparative Analysis of Female Masturbation Practices in Ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. Sexuality in ancient civilizations remains a fascinating subject, often veiled by religious and moral interpretations over centuries. Among the many aspects of human sexuality, masturbation, particularly female masturbation, has been a subject of limited direct historical evidence but significant indirect references through mythology, religious texts, and art. This documentary aims to explore the comparative perspectives of female masturbation in ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian societies, drawing from archaeological findings, literary works, and cultural narratives. Ancient civilizations, particularly Mesopotamia and Egypt, approached sexuality with a combination of religious, mythological, and social perspectives. Unlike modern societies, where sexuality is often influenced by rigid moral frameworks, these civilizations often associated sexual acts with divine creation, fertility, and cosmic order. Masturbation was not merely a private act of pleasure, but frequently intertwined with ritualistic and religious symbolism. Mesopotamian cultures, including the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, provide some of the earliest records of sexuality. While explicit references to female masturbation are sparse, indirect evidence from religious texts and mythological narratives offer insights. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth, suggests that sexuality was intrinsic to divine forces. The goddess Ishtar, Inanna, the deity of love, war, and fertility, frequently engaged in self-pleasuring acts in her mythological tales, emphasizing her sexual autonomy. In certain temple inscriptions, Inanna's priestesses performed ritualistic masturbation as an act of invoking divine favor. Furthermore, clay figurines and terracotta plaques discovered in Mesopotamian excavation sites often depict women in explicit sexual poses. Some scholars argue that these images represent fertility goddesses or priestesses engaging in self-pleasure, symbolizing the power of female sexuality. The sacred marriage ritual, a major festival in Mesopotamian religious practice, also incorporated sacred sexual acts, though whether female masturbation was explicitly involved remains speculative. Ancient Egyptian society was notably more open about sexuality compared to many later civilizations. The creation myths of Egypt explicitly reference masturbation as a divine act. The god Atum was believed to have created the universe through masturbation, emphasizing its sacred nature. While this myth predominantly centers on male self-pleasure, it underscores that masturbation was seen as an act of creation rather than taboo. When examining female masturbation, evidence surfaces in Hathoric rituals associated with the goddess Hathor, who was a deity of love, fertility, and sexual pleasure. Hathor's priestesses engaged in ritual dances and acts that involved stimulating themselves, possibly as a way to channel the goddess's divine energy. The Turin erotic papyrus, a rare document from the New Kingdom period, contains graphic illustrations of sexual acts, although clear depictions of female masturbation remain ambiguous. Statues and fertility-related artifacts also provide insight. The cult of Bastet, the cat-headed goddess of pleasure and fertility, encouraged sexual expression, and some scholars suggest that certain figurines and amulets depicting women in suggestive poses indicate self-pleasure as a means of honoring the goddess. The approach to female sexuality, including masturbation, differed significantly between Mesopotamia and Egypt. Mesopotamian texts often presented sexuality as a function of divine will or social duty, particularly concerning fertility. Women's sexual pleasure was acknowledged, but primarily in the context of serving religious or reproductive purposes. The few instances of possible references to female masturbation seem to be embedded within sacred or fertility-related practices, rather than personal pleasure. In contrast, Egypt appeared to have a more relaxed attitude toward personal pleasure. Women in Egyptian society had relatively more freedom in expressing their sexuality, and their depictions in erotic papyri and tomb artwork suggest an acknowledgement of sexual gratification as a natural aspect of life. Though direct evidence of female masturbation is limited, the symbolic language of Egyptian art and mythology suggests it was neither condemned nor discouraged. Medical and literary texts from both civilizations offer further perspectives. The Kahun Gynecological Papyrus, dating around 1800 BCE, provides medical treatments related to female reproductive health, acknowledging aspects of sexual pleasure in relation to fertility and childbirth. While it does not explicitly mention masturbation, its detailed understanding of female anatomy suggests an awareness of self-pleasuring acts. In Mesopotamia, the Assyrian and Babylonian medical texts include references to sexual dysfunctions and remedies. Some scholars argue that certain herbal prescriptions aimed at increasing female sexual desire may have indirectly encouraged self-pleasure, although no explicit records confirm this interpretation. Visual representations serve as one of the strongest pieces of indirect evidence. In Mesopotamian art, while explicit sexual imagery exists, it is often male-dominated. Female figures are shown in fertility contexts, nursing infants, or engaged in sacred sexual acts. In contrast, Egyptian tomb paintings and erotic papyri exhibit a more holistic depiction of human sexuality, including female pleasure. The symbolic representation of the Ankh, often associated with life and sexual energy, appears in numerous Egyptian artworks. Some scholars propose that its looped shape might metaphorically represent feminine sexual energy, possibly including self-pleasure. In contrast, Mesopotamian cylinder seals and figurines emphasize the power of goddesses like Ishtar, but do not explicitly depict self-pleasuring acts. The theological frameworks of these civilizations shaped perceptions of sexuality. In Mesopotamia, where religious law was codified in texts like the Code of Hammurabi, sexual conduct was often regulated, especially for women. While no laws explicitly mention female masturbation, strict codes regarding adultery and temple prostitution indicate that female sexuality was primarily viewed through a lens of societal roles rather than personal gratification. Egyptian religious beliefs, on the other hand, leaned more towards balance and cosmic order, known as Ma'at. Sexual pleasure, including masturbation, was not viewed as sinful but rather as part of natural life. The pyramid texts and coffin texts reference sexuality in the afterlife, further suggesting that personal pleasure, including self-pleasure, was acknowledged without moral condemnation. The comparative analysis of female masturbation practices in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt highlights both similarities and distinctions. While direct evidence remains scarce, indirect references through mythology, religious practices, medical texts, and art provide significant insights. Mesopotamian society, with its structured legal and religious codes, often framed female sexuality in terms of duty and divine purpose. Egyptian society, with its emphasis on balance and natural order, appears to have been more permissive regarding personal pleasure. Ultimately, female masturbation in these civilizations was likely understood within broader cultural and religious contexts, rather than as an isolated act of personal indulgence. The study of these ancient perspectives not only enriches our understanding of historical sexuality, but also challenges modern assumptions about past attitudes toward female pleasure. As archaeological and textual discoveries continue to emerge, new insights may further illuminate this intriguing aspect of human history.